I think the biggest thing that I learned is that, when I was growing up and going to school, a lot of the information that I always got was, oh, if you work really hard, you'll be successful. If you,
Mm-hmm.
um, show up, you can do anything that you put your mind to. And what I really learned through that experience specifically was hard work alone doesn't get you successful.
Hello, everybody. This is Anthony for a new episode of Your Brother's Podcast. Today, my guest is Mr. Paul Deitch-Cummings. Paul was born and raised in Hawaii, and he supported his family financially since he was 16 years old. He spent the last 6 years of his life working in the financial industry, helping people achieve things they thought they were never possible. His mission is now to eradicate financial illiteracy by helping as many people as possible live on their terms. He was a master at debt elimination, and now he's protecting families by helping them build generational wealth without risk. Paul, my friend, welcome to the show.
Anthony, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here, and yeah, I've enjoyed our connection, and I'm excited to share, knowledge and get to connect more.
Let's go. It's perfect, my friend. So first thing, how we're going to start today. I really like your childhood story when we first met. I think it's very powerful if people want to connect with you, because we know people will remember 22 times more stories than just facts. So please bring us back to your childhood, because I know it was a bit difficult, but it made you who you are today. So let's go back at the beginning. Give us about the family condition and how it forced you to be more responsible and independent at a very young age.
Yeah, so my life story, I mean, just alone, right, being from Hawaii is pretty unique for a lot of people. But when I look at what I'm doing now, it was a very interesting situation because I was actually I grew up with my grandparents, and my dad was a drug addict, and my mom was like a single mom who worked. But it was really interesting for me because how that transpired from when I was younger to when I entered adulthood to where I'm at now. I actually grew up, I would say, pretty wealthy. I grew up with my grandparents. They were both retired, so I basically got everything that I ever wanted. I mean,
Mm,
they supported me financially. I never had much responsibility outside of, doing well in school and occasionally helping around the house here and there. And I didn't really know anything about responsibility or just gratitude. Like, I was a very different person back then. I got everything that I ever wanted. I took a lot of things for granted. I didn't
mm,
really understand. And when basically kind of how things changed for me was by the time before I turned 17, I lost both my grandparents. My dad, even though I didn't really know him, he passed away before I turned 17. And then my mom actually has major health issues. That's kind of been something that has run in my family.
mm-hmm.
Both grandparents had different forms of cancer. We don't really know exactly specifically like what type, because my grandpa wasn't really a doctor person, but
Mm-hmm.
they I spent a lot of time in, hospitals and medical facilities. And it's actually funny that I'm here now because my ultimate goal up until, I would say, maybe the past like 3 or 4 years was to be a neurosurgeon. I wanted to
Really?
be a brain surgeon, because I was
Wow.
in medical facilities all the time. I really got to see how the care like shifted over the years from, my grandparents, and then when my mom came in, and I wanted to kind of change that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always fascinated with the brain, because it's the most interesting thing. I think, it's the most important thing that we have.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought it was really fascinating. But basically, my mom had a ton of health issues, and then she actually nearly almost passed away as well. So I actually started going to college when I was 16. I went to college when I was 16. I worked multiple jobs. I didn't like completely take care of like my grandpa, but I helped him, or I helped my mom do it. And then I ended up finishing up about a year until I had to support my family financially. I worked
Mhm.
20-hour days for 2 years straight. A lot of
Wow.
the information as a teenager, so I always joke with people that by the time I'm 30, I'll have worked more hours in like 15 years than most people work in a lifetime. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been pretty insane, but I think the biggest thing that I learned is that when I was growing up and going to school, a lot of the information that I always got was, oh, if you work really hard, you'll be successful. If you,
Mhm.
um, show up, you can do anything that you put your mind to. And what I really learned through that experience specifically was hard work alone doesn't get you successful. I
Yeah.
was working 20-hour days for 2 years straight. I mean, I guess you could say, like, I had, money because I fixed my financial situation. I was
Yeah.
able to support my family, but I didn't have time. And I I didn't feel like I was really living. I was more existing, because I was just working. I,
Mm.
I worked my life away for 2 years. And so many that really was the hook, I think, more than anything, on why I got into what I'm doing now, is that I see so many people, talk about like slavery, when we had this whole Black Lives Matter movement. But it's like, if you look at how people view money in this country, almost everyone is a slave to money. You're either trading your time for money at some point, or you're like so obsessed with it, and
Yeah.
it I didn't want to feel chained to money. I feel like money is essential, but more than anything for me, I wanted to impact the world and help people. And the the funny part too about how I got into the whole finance world was I spent 4 years in banking, and my plan when I first started was to stay for a year or two, because I I got tired of working, the 20-hour days. I wanted something to where I had a lot more structure and I could work, one job, because the plan at the time was for me to go back to school.
Mhm.
And I I would do research, and as a neurosurgeon, they make over $1 million a year. I don't know what it is now because I haven't, kept up with like as
Yeah.
things changed, but at the time, $1 million was a lot more than it is now. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, doing a ton of research, I've always been a analytical person. I realized that a ton of people who are in the medical field, you're making all this money, but what's the point of making all this money if you don't know how to manage it? And that was a huge
Oh,
problem
yeah.
that I was seeing, is that a lot of people in the industry were making a ton of money, but they didn't know how to manage it. They were constantly losing money, and they didn't really have an ideal financial situation. So I kind of planned ahead
Mhm.
and was like, well, if I need to get a job, this would be a great one because it would teach me, about money, and it would be great for my structure and schedule, and ultimately let me go back. Well, I ended up staying for 4 years because, kind of like what you said in the bio, for three of those 4 years outside of the first year, I really was a master debt eliminator. I used to help people from all different types of age ranges. Like I want to say when I started, I was 18 or 19. It, I want to say it
Wow.
was probably not closer to 19, but I was helping people who were like on average 3 to 4 times my age, and
Mm. How did you
it
learn that?
was
By yourself, just with books, or because I can imagine that elimination, there's some content out there, but what about finding you that is working compared to other people who are promoting something and maybe they just fall short and they always fail?
well, I've never really been, that was I guess you could say, my first big like sales venture, and I've always been an analytical person. So I've never been in that environment before, so that's why it took me, a year to familiarize with the. It was my first professional environment, and if you've ever been to Hawaii, it's pretty laid back. A lot of people aren't really very like businessy and like
Hmm.
suity and type of things. So having
Yeah.
to wear dress clothing all the time was a huge change for me. Being
Hmm.
in an environment where I was the youngest person, like by far, was a huge change for me. And I really did a lot of research. I asked questions from people who were having success. I did a bunch of my own research, and what I really found is that it really all comes down to like a numbers game. It's all about how much money you can consolidate and just putting things together through like a budget or a plan type of thing. So once you kind of figure out the basics, all the specifics, you can with the rates and how things work and this and that. That was basically what it what it was for me. But I share this story with people all the time because people look and see where I'm at now, all the adventures that I've had, all the mentors that I had, and they think that it was always like that for me, and it really wasn't, with everything, because I started in the same position. I would probably say worse position than most of my clients did, because
Hmm.
I don't really know a lot of other people who did what I did at my age. Like I know people who can relate to
Yeah.
having been put in that situation, but not at the age point, in the sense that I had so many things that were hindering me, like legally. And when I got into the finance world, that was definitely, I would say, a big problem that I had was I was insecure about my age, because
Yeah.
I thought, well, and I'll always remember what my grandpa told me, and he told me that it doesn't matter how smart you are, that there's no better teacher than life and experience. And
Hmm.
that was something that I was really lacking, because here I was, I didn't even know how to take care of myself at 16, yet alone like
Yeah.
how to support an entire family. I didn't know anything about budgeting, finance, anything like that. So it really was a rude awakening, but I'm grateful, that I had that opportunity. And what I would tell you is that it it really helped me with what I'm doing now, because I when I first started this venture, I think many people, I'll speak for myself, that
Hmm.
we've all been given, information that we thought was true at the time, or we chose to accept someone else's truth instead of the actual truth. And that was definitely how it was for me throughout that time. I thought that, oh, banking was so good, and I was helping people save a bunch of money. But looking back with what I know now, I definitely feel like I did help people more than I hurt them. But
Yeah.
hindsight being 2020, I robbed a lot of people of wealth, because we have this disposition, and a lot of people work at the bank. Like if you go ahead and ask, next time you go to the bank, for anyone watching, go ahead and ask your teller if they next time they tell you to, oh, open a savings account. It's like, why would I put any percent of my money to earn 0.2%? That's the
Yeah.
average that people are
Yeah.
earning in a savings account. They're probably gonna look at you like shocked, because they probably don't even know what the interest rate is.
Uh-huh.
Because that's just how, in many ways, I felt like they're just like how many ordinary people, or I shouldn't say ordinary, but many like citizens here who live in the
Hmm.
US are like programmed. You're taught to constantly do things that benefit other people instead of yourself. And the thing that I love the most about that, though, was that I spoke to you earlier about how impact was always something that was really important to me. And that was never more apparent than when I worked in the banking world, because I was a top producer. I got numerous accolades for
Yeah.
service. I was loved by I would say 95% of my customers, probably even more, but we'll just be a little modest. And um, you know, the biggest thing for me was that I got paid probably on 10% of the actual like commissions and work that I did because it didn't meet bank standards, but I did it because it would save people, on average thousands of dollars a month.
Uh-huh.
Imagine how different your life would be if you had an additional 10, 20,000 or even more than that a year to use to live life on your terms, and to stop putting more money in these institutions and corporations and give it to you and your family, so that was a big a big thing for me. And I had to go out of my way many times. I mean, I have so many stories, but I just remember one time I was working at one of my branches, and this was after I had like signing authority, so I had kind of like control. And I worked like 2 or 3 hours like after. So our the when I transferred to probably the second or third branch that I was at, we were like a smaller in-store branch, so we closed at
Mhm.
7 o'clock. Well, there were times where I would stay 3 hours after, helping to finalize deals and
Really?
get things in order because it was a massive change for a lot of these people, and I always used to get asked the question, what makes you different? Because there's so many people in the finance space where it's all about money. I mean, we'll kind of get into that more in
Yeah.
the interview, but
Uh-huh.
I always would get asked people, I constantly spent, I would say, 80 to 90% of my time just like fixing problems,
Hmm.
that somebody else helped these people, but they did them a disservice. And that's what I would always tell them. I would always start things off by saying, I apologize that uh, this happened to you, but I can't change your reality unless you let
Yeah.
me. And a lot of them did, and it. I don't really like stay in touch because I'm not in Hawaii currently. I'm in Florida, and it's
Hmm.
the time difference kind of gets to you because
I can
when I'm
imagine.
awake, they're sleeping and things like
How
that.
many
But
hours difference now with
6 hours.
6 hours? Okay.
Yeah. hmm
Yeah.
So, but a lot of them are doing well. A lot of business owners who didn't necessarily have the funding or also had financial problems don't have that anymore. So I definitely enjoyed my time there. And I think more than it taught me about finances, it taught me about life and character and how important integrity is, because that's really the number one skill I feel like you have to have as a financial person. And I always tell people that I'm going to tell you what you need to hear versus what you want to hear. You're probably not going to like what I have to say, because a lot of people don't, because it's pointing out a lot of the problems and holes and things like that. But if you're not willing to do that for people, I feel like that's so disrespectful, because if you have the knowledge and power that I have to, really change people's lives, if you're not doing that because you're afraid of, oh, maybe they'll be upset with you, or they'll, you're concerned about what they think more than about how much you can help them, that to me is the ultimate disservice.
Yeah. And so powerful what you're saying. And I I think we can all see in the world like the stereotypes of finance industry, like Wall Street, banking,
Yeah.
big shots, like ruthless, cutthroat, and most of it is real. So
Yeah.
to have a guy like you who is authentic, who has integrity, and who wants to actually help, and if a product is not made for that client, then you will not be afraid to say that's not for you. Let me show you
Right.
something else that is more suitable.
Mhm.
So how do you think we can move forward in terms of you maybe are 1 or 2% of financial workers who are in this mindset? How do you plan to make this transition of having a community with you of guys and girls who wants to be like this and move like a new wave, a fresh wave of people who are really want there to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, and this is probably, I'm gonna drop a bomb here for a lot of people. This is the most important life lesson that I've learned is that the the hardest lesson that I had to learn is that no matter how much you know something is right and you want to make that decision for people, the the ultimate gift that we have, is the freedom to make our own choices. And something that I've really had to learn, especially in this venture, because when I first started, I feel like I wanted financial freedom more for my clients than they wanted it for themselves, if that makes sense. Like I
Yes.
was I was willing to do all the work regardless of how much money they had, what their situation was like, because I know that for, I would say, 99% of people, that they were in a better situation than I was, because just based off of their age alone, I mean, the fact that I wasn't even 18 legally hindered me from doing a lot of things,
I can
even though
imagine.
I had the ability, So I think that it really starts off with the choice to want to improve, and I just made a video the other day about how I'm really not so sure that people really want financial freedom, because if you look at the choices that people are making, and there's tons of reasons for it, right? Like maybe it was the information that they've been financially programmed with, or they really trusted somebody who they thought knew what they were doing, and like I said, accepted somebody else's truth. There's so many different things that you can pinpoint, but what I think it really comes down to is that you have to be open-minded and be willing to listen to something, that somebody's going to say. And I understand, because of, like you said earlier, the stigma of this industry. There's a reason why the financial services industry specifically creates more millionaires than any other industry, because money is essential to live. A lot of people, we're in a very interesting economic situation right now. A lot of people are hurting for money because they they need it, to buy food, to pay rent, to afford gas, and it's it's something that's inevitable. I mean, and with everything else, as much as I would love to tell you that I I can make, in a perfect world, everyone would be transparent and
Yeah.
authentic. That's not the case. And you really, the best way that I would tell people to kind of like filter through that is do your research and ask questions.
Hmm.
A big a big problem that I see with a lot of people in this industry, and I actually honestly even made this issue when I first got into business, just because it was such a massive mindset for me being an employee all these years, and coming in business, is
Yeah.
that so many people in the finance space want to advise people on, like, oh, what to do before even really understanding their story, and what they're trying to do. Like, what are your goals?
Hmm.
Like, what is your budget? What are you trying to do? And it the problem that I have with that is that the biggest issue that I've found is that a lot of people don't even know what they want. I'm asking people, like, when do you want to retire? How much money do you want to have annually in retirement? Like, what is on your bucket list? And a lot of people are just drawing a blank, because with the way that things are, I think a lot of people become prisoners of the moment. Everyone looks at this dire economic situation that we have as, oh shoot, I don't know if I'm even going to have a financial future. So that's a huge problem that a lot of people are having, is just not getting so caught up in the present and think about the future and what you really want. Because when life gets tough, especially when, when it did for me, that was really kind of like what got me through. Every entrepreneurship is a very tough journey. I remember when I first started, nobody gave me the time of day. Nobody, I would reach out to people and just be like, "Hey, can I share something with you?" And I didn't, and people didn't even have the decency to tell me, not interested. Or a lot of people told me that you're picking the wrong path, making a massive mistake, and it it's tough, and just like how a lot of people are in the same predicament now financially, it's you just got to do your research and figure out what you really want. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And how do you know what you want for somebody who doesn't know or think they don't know? What is maybe some good questions, or do you have any tips, any physical process? Is it meditation? Is it going in nature, get inspiration from somebody else? How do you find out what do you really want? It's a good question.
Yeah. So you're right, Anthony. That's a great question. And what I've really found is that where I had a lot of room to improve was definitely on connection. I think that because of COVID and a lot of people switching remote, that it really hindered the personal conversations that we were having. I spent a lot of time over the past 3 years in my own room, like alone, just
Yeah.
thinking about things. And
Mm-hmm.
it was funny because I was working remotely and switched from like a government contractor thing to now, oh shoot, like I need to talk to people on a daily basis, like.
Yeah.
And I really had a lot of work to do with connection. And I would say there's three really good questions that I ask every person to some extent that I connect with. And the first
Mhm.
question that I ask them is, what is your ultimate goal? I think so many people are capable of so much more than they think. And joining the 10X program has like really changed like everything for me. It's
Yeah.
that what is your ultimate goal? And that's a massive question that I ask a lot of people. And I I can honestly say I've probably gotten like one or two answers out of over 100 people that I was like, wow, that's deep. A lot of people are like,
Hmm.
oh, well, I want to make a ton of money. I want to
All
make sure that
superficial.
my family, yeah. And it's like you really need to define what that is for you, because and this kind of goes back to what I was saying a little earlier about how so many people in this industry make a predisposition of like what whether or not people are going to be interested based off of like their current situation, instead of just giving people the information and letting them decide. Because $1 million to somebody could be like something that they never thought before, whereas like
Hmm.
my goal this year alone is to make $1 million. So it's like
Yeah.
every single person is different. Financial freedom and what that means and what that looks like for a lot of people is very different. So I think clarity and really defining what that is for you is really where that all starts. Like I was telling you, a lot of people don't even know when they want to retire because they don't even think that it's possible.
Hmm.
Or and then the second question that I always ask people is, what is what is the greatest either obstacle that you're having currently? It could be life, business, or that you've conquered. Because that was really a huge turning point for me, when I talked about how being an entrepreneur is hard, and every single entrepreneur who tells you that they never thought about quitting at some point or
Yeah.
doing something else is like absolutely lying. Because there's just days
100%.
where you're like kind of like on a roller coaster. In the beginning
Yeah.
you're just like you're working harder than most people would ever dream of working, because you want financial freedom, that you want to be able to control and own your time and trade um, money for time instead of time for money like most people do.
Hmm.
And it really, I think, comes down to really leaning into both your goal and what you've conquered. Because for me, I always say that what I went through when I was 16 is the hardest thing that I'll ever experience. And I know a lot of people don't like that, but I want to share with you why that is. I'm at such a different point now where because I have the experiences that I've had over the past 9 years, I'm 25 now. I have both the network now, the knowledge, a lot more money than I did then, that I have more resources to
Mhm.
solve any type of problem that I would get. And I think it's really important to tie that in anytime you're starting something new, whether it's a business or, um, any type of goal. A lot of people have been into the whole fitness goals and, marathons and all that type of thing that I've
Yeah.
been seeing. So anytime you're doing that, just remember that you've already conquered so much more than you thought you could have, or look at other people who are in your scenario. I think the hardest part for me with really defining that at the time was that social media wasn't really as big as it is now. And
Hmm.
being that there wasn't really even anyone near my age group where I worked or in my social circle that was in the same situations, I had such a hard time kind of like digging in and really understanding it. So once you are able to answer that question, and then the third question is, what are you currently doing to achieve the goal? Because a lot of people, I found out from connecting that there's a lot of entrepreneurs here who have big goals. They want to do X, they want to do Y, but nobody's actually doing them. And that's why I always ask people, what are you doing to achieve this? What are you willing to do to achieve this? And those are three questions I think that can definitely help get clarity for sure.
Yeah. What do you think people should give up in order to receive what they really want? Is it just bad habits, or there's something else that really, like, you have to sacrifice X, Y, and Z to really get where you want to be?
That's a great question. So I can tell you that for me, I was always told that, comfort is like the growth killer.
Hmm.
But what I've really learned from my experience is that I honestly think that pride is the growth killer, because if you look at how many people, we have billions of people in the world today, right? Everybody
Yeah.
suffers from some type of problem.
Uh-huh.
And I don't really know anyone who is so efficient at it that they they solve it, almost like solve all their problems immediately. But if you look at the access that we have, through social media and um all the networks and things like that, there's really no reason why we can't solve any type of problem we're currently experiencing. But I think that pride is the killer, because especially for men, I don't know about you, but I grew up with my grandparents, so talking really wasn't a thing in my house, so mental health was a massive issue
Mm.
for me. I i was told that you be humble, you don't um I knew like a lot of answers in class, but I didn't want attention. I was told, "Oh, you don't want attention, be quiet, humble."
Yeah.
So that's you're an introvert, all these type of things that we tell ourselves. And I think it's pride is the issue, because a lot of people, you'll find that they want to ask somebody for help. Uh, a big way that I would tell people is that in business, if you don't learn to ask, it's uncomfortable, because if they're having pride issues, you're definitely going to be having pride issues, and saying, "Hey, I do X, I do Y. How can I help you?" or something along those lines. And
Yeah.
what I found is that people are more receptive to that, because they're just not willing to make the first move. They
Hmm.
want you to be able to post something. And I found that when I make videos that, hey, I do this, and my goal is to help 100 families this year, I would love to help you. I get responses, because people don't want to ask, but when you offer, it's a different kind of ball game.
I
And
see.
that's really how it was for me with mental health. I really had to ask myself all those questions, like, look at what this is costing you, because I didn't live 10x life. I always tell people, when I was younger, that I was born to be 10x, because I mean, I didn't know any other 12-year-olds who wanted to be a neurosurgeon when uh none of the doctors in the state that I lived knew what that was. So, but I had to learn to ask myself, those difficult questions. And I think that that's why personal development and growth is so hard for a lot of people, is that you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And pride is a huge inhibitor for sure.
Yeah. Um, Maybe you can tell to people, because I know about this little part of the story that you forgot to mention, but when you were a kid, you were actually studying things way ahead of your age, correct? Like elementary school, you were studying like college level classes or books, if I remember well.
Yeah, so when I was in elementary school, I started reading like chapter books and like novels when I was in first grade. And I I would read, it was so long ago, but I want to say like on average, I used to read probably like 200 or 300 books a year up until I really kind of stopped in elementary school because so like sixth grade is what that is in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And we would do like benchmark tests, or it it changed like so many times over the years to where they switched to like online and things like that. But they would basically measure, like what was your reading and writing level. And by the time that I went to middle school was like really when they kind of dialed down on it a lot more than when I was in elementary. I was at a college level. Uh, yeah,
Were
both
you
for.
bullied because of that? Anybody was laughing at you like, "Oh, you're the big head, the big brain," or nobody would care about this at the time?
Oh, no, nobody. I didn't really, face a lot of bullying, one, because
Uh-huh.
I think people wanted help with their schoolwork, so
Yeah,
that definitely worked in my favor. But I knew into school that I was a nerd, but I've never been somebody that really cared what, people thought. I was always different.
yeah,
I I'm not like my mom, not like my dad, like, I'm really not like a lot of people that I grew up with, besides, my aunt who I'm here
uh-huh.
with now. And
Yeah,
it, that was, like, a huge thing for me. And I I think that's where the introvert thing really kinda got me through, was that a lot of this was ingrained in my brain that, "Oh, you be quiet, humble, don't, like, draw attention to yourself." So coming into the business world, as you know, it's like you need to be active, you need
right.
to seek
Loud,
attention. Yeah,
versatile.
you need to be willing to put yourself out there. So it was definitely a massive shift for me, but like I said, it's all about getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
So somebody who has the idea to start a new project, maybe a new business,
Mhm.
something creative, they don't like their job and they want to switch to something better. So you were in banking and you were there for a while, but eventually you found your path and you had the courage to go to do your own thing. So what is one or two tips you can give for people who are afraid to jump in the unknown, and if they know it's the right thing to do, they feel in their heart, man, I cannot ignore that anymore. Like it's so loud.
Yeah.
I have to take action. So how do I start to just break this mold of comfort and just maybe they're
Mhm.
secure and they have a family or yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And I can actually say that, social media and doing these type of things were definitely something, for me, that I've never done before. When I was an employee, and I didn't really have, a ton of time then because I was always working, but I never really liked social media. And I knew that technology was important, because it's
Mhm.
done massive advancement over the years. But I never liked social media just because there there was always so much misinformation, or I felt like people were just wasting their time there. I used to see a
Yeah.
lot of
I was
coworkers
the
that would
same,
just
man. I was the same. So
scroll,
like
and I was like,
recently.
yeah, and I was just like, there's a lot of like misinformation. Like, why am I gonna come on here? And then when I realized how, how insane it was that you literally it's so insane how literally everybody now, because I'd say just about every single person has a phone. I mean, you even have like kids who have phones now.
Hmm.
You have a voice. Like, anybody can go on, any of these social media platforms, make a video if you have a message. it's so powerful that you have to, if you're not making use of that, I think that's definitely a massive disservice, especially because of how, expensive it is in business to pay for marketing campaigns and do all these type of stuff that social media basically allows you to do for free, and you get to connect with people all over the world. But in terms of, I would say, kind of getting out from employee to business owner, entrepreneur, I think you really have to dial down on your purpose and what's important to you. You know, you need to have a goal that's bigger than money. And Grant Cardone always says that you need to have something that's so massive that it takes you a lifetime to achieve, because
Yeah.
it's going to drive you forward. If your goal is only to make, I don't know, 6 7 figures a year, it's going to get old real quick,
Absolutely.
because there's so many different verticals that if that's your goal, you can do that. But if your goal is to, impact people, make like massive change in the world, you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice the security and comfort that that job um gives you, or you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice your time. And I can speak from experience, because that's what I did when I was 16 years old. I
Yeah.
worked 20+ hour days, and it for 2 years straight without a day off. And I used to hear people like complaining about working 8 hours,
Yeah.
and I was just
Like
like, oh, I
you
was like,
don't
I
know
cannot,
anything about time.
right? Like, so I think that that's what it comes down to. You need to be clear on what you want to do, and then what you're willing to do it. Because for the social media thing, I had to get really comfortable, making videos every day.
Mhm.
I mean, Anthony's from a completely different country, and we
Yeah.
connected on social media. So it's like you have to be willing to do things that you've never done before to get to where you've never been before. And
Exactly.
that's what it's all about, I would say.
That's true, man. So true. Um, I know that you had some powerful mentors, and I guess maybe you still have them today. I was curious, how did you meet these guys and which kind of impact they had in your life? And maybe you can tell us a bit more like, is it you see them every week? Is it once a month? And how do you keep this exchange very fair when there are guys who are making or have a net worth of 7 8 figures and you're just like, you're starting out in life, you're 25. How do you keep this interaction with the mentor powerful so they feel fulfilled as much as you?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that, I said earlier that age was definitely a huge insecurity for me. And it took me a long time to really understand that age is just a number. And
Hmm.
a massive mistake that I made in business, and I'll probably make a video, kind of going in depth more on like major mistakes, just to share more value with people. But a massive mistake that I made was that understanding that, business is a marathon, not a sprint. I was trying to, because mentorship is really all about acceleration. So what I was trying to do is I was trying to accelerate and do all these things so quickly
Yeah.
that it it created not only like a ton of unnecessary problems, but it created huge like kind of mindset things. Like I kind of lost track of, what I was doing. And what I would say is that you're trying so hard to, be like people like Warren Buffett or Grant Cardone, these people who are massively successful. And you have to look at the fact that they're massively successful, but look at how long it took them. I mean, Warren Buffett's like 91 years old. He was well off like before then, but it wasn't like it was something that took him, 5 to 10 years. That is a very realistic reality for someone like me. Or when you ask that question, something that I think about is that a lot of people think that, you can buy your way in a lot of these mentorships or things like that, which you can, but money will get you in the door, but your work ethic and value that you provide is what keeps you there. And when I talk to a lot of my mentors, the biggest thing that they tell me is that you're so far ahead of where I was when I was your age. I think when Grant Cardone was 25, he was talking about how he was like a drug addict and,
Yeah,
going
he
to
was.
rehab and he had like no money,
I was the same,
and
by the way. Also.
yeah. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, so many people underestimate just how much they've accomplished because you're looking at people who are massively successful than you, but you also have to understand that for me, a lot of my mentors are 20 plus years older than I am. So it's like, and I have goals to be a billionaire in the next 5 years, where it took them nearly almost like 10 years longer to do that, and a lot of them aren't even there yet. They'll definitely be there because they're
Yeah.
massively successful, but I think it's just really important to put that into perspective and understand that there's so much more things that you can offer to people to add value. Because I always get asked this question by like, "Oh, well, what if I don't have money, or what if I don't have X, and then what if I don't have Y?" And I was like, there's so many skills and intangibles that you can't teach someone, like work ethic, ambition. It There's just so many different things that you can't teach. I feel like you can't teach someone to have like character and integrity. It's kind of something that you either have or don't. And
Hmm.
that is how, regardless of how old you are or what your situation has been, just add value. And that's something that I always try to do.
Yeah, man, that's just. I can imagine like people who maybe they're searching for mentors and they feel intimidated, and you found great. I will not, of course, ask names, but what was your approach to just to reach out to them? Just like pure luck and just okay, I'm gonna go and ask because some of my guests they said just give the permission to people to say no themselves before saying in your own mind that you decide for
Yeah.
them if they have to they will say yes or no. I did the same with my podcast, and I have
Mm.
some guests coming in the next few weeks, and people will be impressed. Like, oh, he said yes, that's cool, and you're starting out. You just never know
Yeah.
what will happen, but if you never ask, you will never know. And I think it's from a song. What is it? If you never ask, you'll never know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what was your approach as a mentality to like, I'm worthy, I'm good enough,
Mm.
I can receive attention, time, energy from them, compared to somebody who's like, man, they will, of course, they will say no. They must be so busy right now. They have 1,000 things to do, and they never saw my face. How to make this mindset shift?
Well, that's a great question, Anthony. And I would say, I'll definitely give you names of my mentor because I think it's important, if any, well, mentors, because if anyone is watching this and they want people to look up to, all these people they're massively successful financially, but I think more than anything, they're 1,000 times better people. And
Mm,
so it really all started, I guess you could say, with 10x, right? So one of my mentors, Grant Cardone, and then I actually met one of my favorite mentors. She's probably actually jumped on the to like the second favorite person on my top five list. Her name is Danao Delgado. I don't want to take too much time to explain her because her story is massively long. But I would say and then I have another mentor with what I'm doing financially. His name is Richard Conlin, another someone who's massively successful, who's in the top 1%, well, 1/10 of 1% of financial professionals in the world. And then what I would say is that for me, what I really like, because I'm a very selective person, when it comes to even opportunities, like I get tons of messages every day of like people who want to work. I don't turn people down like financially, but in terms of like opportunities and like other ventures, I'm
mm,
open-minded because that was never something that was done for me and I listen to people,
yeah.
but I'm very, very selective with like what opportunities I choose to work with or who I'm following, and I don't just like add people, for followers or
Why did
anything
you
like that.
accept to be on the show on my episode?
I I accepted it because when I met with you, because that's kind of like a common thing, in these networking groups, you meet with people, you connect. Your I, your story was definitely a big thing, and I would say that the thing that I have in common with all three of my mentors is that we all have similar stories. It was just that they happened at different ages. A lot of
Mhm.
them, in most cases, were older than I was. So the fact that I was younger and I did it, especially in a place like Hawaii where, it's insane. Everything's like so expensive to
Yeah.
live, and you really have to be financially literate in order to survive there, yet alone thrive.
Mhm.
And I think that was something that definitely helped me, as well as I'm able to connect with people from all different age groups because I grew up with my grandparents, so it's like I was able to connect with people who were older. And then my my mom had me when she was a lot older, so it's like then you have the generation like just before that, and then you have like probably people who are like my friends' parents' age, and then
Mhm.
my age and even earlier. So I can really connect with people no matter what age groups they are, because I've been in even though I'm only 25, I feel like I've lived a lifetime. There's not really many things that I can say that, oh, I haven't experienced yet, um, either personally, mentally, physically, or whatever. So I would say that was definitely a big thing. And I realized that the most important thing is that you need to be there first in your mind before you get there, like, physically. And even though I wasn't even though I wasn't a millionaire, then I was there in my mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when I would talk and communicate with people, I had the experience, I had the knowledge, and yeah, I would say that was definitely the thing for me, was their stories, and then just being able to add value.
Beautiful, brother. Beautiful. Let me see what else I can have here. Aha, that's a good one here. What do you think can be improved about the financial industry today?
I think the biggest thing that could be improved about it is that people need to know what a lot of the common financial decisions that people are making, they need to know what that actually means, because a lot of people are listening to professionals that don't even know what they're doing. It's like I ask people this question: if somebody is a fiduciary, which means that they do things in the best of their client, then why is like 90% of the population, like, losing money in the market now? Like, I don't even understand really why risk is a thing, because if you ask any person, how much money do you want to lose? A lot of them are going to tell you zero. I don't know anybody who wants to lose any money.
Yeah, of course.
And I think it starts off, with ourselves. And like I said, there's a lot of people in the industry who look at people as, another number, and they want to give you quotes, and they really don't want to, like, meet with you and just get information, because it's kind of like it's like boom boom boom, they just want to keep cranking them out. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how it was in a way in the banking world. When you had these like loans, it wasn't about like, oh, what are you going to use this loan for? It was, hey, you got approved for this is your rate, type of thing. And it there's more of a big thing for me that I focus on, is that, and this was why I did everything that I did in the banking world, even though I didn't get paid, is that I want people to benefit from things more than I do, if that makes sense. Like, if I'm making $1,000 off of something, I want somebody to make, like 100,000 or like a
Mm,
million, because any type of money that I make is already kind of a cherry on top, because
yeah.
they're not going to win the trade, because I get to completely change their life, and that's priceless. So there you can't put a price tag on that. But that's definitely what I would say, is that people need to be educated on how to build wealth without risk, which is, what I do. And a lot of people think that because they've, been duped before by financial people, which I completely understand, because
Yeah.
that was a huge concern that I had when I first started. Like I said, when I started, I didn't know anything about finances, investing, credit, wealth, anything like that. So I was in their same position, and I just tell them, like, I'm the number that we decide on is not going to be my number. It's going to be your number. And I think that that's why what I do is so different, is that I don't care whether you make 20, $30,000 a year or six figures. If you're willing to be open-minded and transparent and you want to change, I'm willing to help you regardless, and how much money I make. And I think that's really what it's all about. And I focus as much as possible because, like I told you earlier, I think so many people focus on their opinion, like what the dollar amount means to them versus how much it could be for the other person. I give people factual information and I relate it to real life examples, and
Mhm.
it's usually pretty simple for people. So I'll kind of give you an example, just to add a little more value here, is that a lot of people, what they're currently experiencing now with why the stock market crash is a massive issue is because what people have been told for the past 50, probably I would say like 50, 60 years is you put your money in the stock market. They'll use like terms like compound interest, leverage, and all these type of things that people really don't understand. But they look at the history, so they look at the projection versus how much the world's changed. So if you're looking, 50, 60 years ago, like you could put your money in the banks because banks were paying you like 10% interest rate,
Mhm.
or the stock market was like booming. But the the world's changed so much, and I mean, even in the past 20 years, we've added a sixth of our population, yet we have five times the amount of money in print, in just like 20 years. Like, and everyone's still doing the same things 50, 60 years ago when we're in unprecedented situations. That's why this whole inflation thing is a massive issue. And what a lot of people don't understand about it is that it's not a political issue. Obviously there's some foreign problems that have escalated things,
Mhm.
but it's a money issue because our debt is our total debt's over 100 trillion. You know, people don't realize that the taxpayers are going to have to pay for that money, and where a lot of people hold their wealth is in tax qualified plans like 401ks, IRAs, and you're sold this idea of, oh, I'll get the little tax deduction now when taxes are actually at one of the lowest rates that they've ever been in the
Mhm.
history. And because the debt's going up, it's only inevitable for taxes to go up because that's how our government makes money in the United States, is through taxes. And the reality is that not only are people losing it because their retirement accounts are in the market, so when the market crashes like it is now, people are losing like 20 to 30% of their retirement. And that's why so many people this was definitely a massive problem in Hawaii where a lot of elderly people were working because they didn't have a correct plan in place, and that's what I would say that needs to be more educated, is that people need to learn how to put more money in their pockets, in their families' pockets, instead of giving it to the government and these financial institutions. And that's really what I think is the most tragic thing, is that over the course of the average person's lifetime, they're going to end up giving more money to the government and these institutions than their own family. And
Mm.
that's why I do what I do, and I help people build generational wealth without risk, because I feel like you should put more money in your pocket, and you shouldn't have to turn to resources like GoFundMe, if something happens. And
Yeah.
you need money. And that's why a big thing that I share with people is that GoFundMe is the biggest healthcare provider, and they're not even in the healthcare industry.
Paul, we're close to the end of this call. I would like you to tell me or tell our audience. So, with all that being said, if we fast forward maybe 5 years from now and people go and look back at our episode in 2022, what is one powerful message that represents the wisdom of your life right now from the 25 years you've lived? Some people say, oh, it's not so much, he's not so old. You have wisdom. We hear it, it's obvious. What is a short message that you can tell to people that's going to be impactful and they can just leave today and just have a better life because of that?
I would say that, this is a really tough question. You're really putting me on the spot.
It's the
here,
atomic bomb on all my guests. It's the same question. They have to just go with it.
Man.
They get the best out of you, man.
I would say that circumstances are the catalyst for change, but the actual change doesn't happen until you take action.
Oh, love it. I love it. Paul, how can people connect with you if we want to have more about your financial services, social media, website? How do we connect with you? Thank you for this episode. And tell me your info.
Yeah, so first I just want to say thank you so much to Anthony and his audience. Like, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be here. And for social media, I'm on Instagram. My Instagram's Paul Deitch-23. I'm on Facebook. It's just Paul Deitch, and then on LinkedIn is Paul Deitch-Cummings. I believe if you type my name, it should show up, but you might have to type in financial services specialist because of the way that you set things up. And on that LinkedIn profile, I actually wrote an article that was featured across 8 global business and finance magazines, and I was only in the entrepreneur space for 4 months. And that article really does kind of foreshadow everything that's going on today. So I would say definitely take a look to read it and help your family build generational wealth without risk.
Bro, thank you so much for your time. Guys, this is Anthony Rivest for Your Brothers Podcast. You can follow me personally at my name on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. YouTube channel will be with this podcast already. So Your Brothers Podcast, please subscribe, like, comment, share with your family, your friends that you think they're gonna like this content. And if you want to support me financially, there will be a link for a Patreon. You can give any money you want if you feel like it, if you feel inspired to help us grow this mission. I have amazing guests coming for you in the next few weeks and a few months, and we're just starting to roll. So see you next time, guys. Thank you so much. Paul, bye-bye.